Welcome to Into the Black Hole, a podcast by three guys discussing soccer from a prairie perspective. On today's podcast, our very first, we discuss the Canadian men's and women's national team and the recent coaching changes in the Canadian MLS clubs. So on Monday last week, before we were recording this, before we started episode 1 here, nothing much had happened for a long time. There was not a lot of news on any of the domestic MLS teams, and men's national team, women's national team hasn't, of course, done very much since their awesome performance in the summer. And then all of a sudden on Monday, I start looking on the news lines, and all hell's breaking loose. Like, there are stories about all of these things instantly. And one of the ones that we're going to turn to first is about the Canadian men's national team interim coach Colin Miller and the announcement of several upcoming friendlies. So, gentlemen, interim coach, is this good, bad, or otherwise? And is the choice of Colin Miller good, bad, or otherwise? Maybe I'll throw this to you, Jeff, first to get us started.
Okay, well, I don't see any problem with Miller coming on board and taking care of the two friendlies here at the end of the month. And I'm really curious if it was a tactical decision in the sense that he actually is going to bring in a few of the guys from FC Edmonton to take a couple of spots on the roster. Whether they'll be starting or not, I'm not sure. I mean, he's already stated that they're probably going to be going with a younger squad. So why not? I mean, you know, what do we have to lose at this point after and I'm sorry to the entire country for this one, but after the bomb out in San Pedro Sula, I mean, what do you have to lose by bringing in any and every other guy that's available just to see what they can do when they pull the red and white shirt on? So
it's okay. You can just apologize to our mothers, because those are the only people that are going to be listening to this, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And Zach out in Chatham, because he said he would on Facebook.
I might force my wife to listen to this, but she, I don't think I can do it. So anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. No problem with that. With Miller coming on board and taking care of this. In fact, I mean, have a guy like him come in and bring in some kind of new life. I mean, they had to wash everything away after the massacre down south, and what a better way just to bring a guy who's been in with one of the clubs right now that is such a young roster, a lot of Canadians, of course, and give them a shot to at least, do something with these younger guys and try to inspire them a little bit so they, wear their hearts on their sleeve anytime they're out there. So,
Lars, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a decent hiring. Like, I'm not really influenced one way or the other. I think when we were talking about this beforehand, the listeners didn't get a chance to discuss or listen to our discussion beforehand, but Colin Miller, he's going to be occupied when it comes to springtime, but at this time and in the January friendlies, he's going to be the right person to be the interim head coach. When March rolls around, whether he's going to be available to participate in I believe it was the Qatar friendly with Japan, or any other friendlies is a different matter, but that's a product of the NASL's compressed schedules, and they're two seasons in one. They're opening and closing seasons.
Yeah, not to break topic or anything, but that's like they're practically running a apertura clausura style schedule, aren't they?
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Anyway,
but yeah, going back to Miller, they could have picked someone worse. They could have picked someone who would coach nothing more than a senior men's team in Halifax.
Ouch.
I liked Hart. Don't talk down on Hart.
Yeah, we're already getting into our first argument here.
But no, they could have picked someone worse to do the job. They picked someone with some experience. It's not a great depth of experience, but he has some experience in coaching various teams. And he's with FC Edmonton, and as an interim coach, it'll work going forward. It's they're going to take the time that they need to hire the person they want to do the job, and that might even take to April to May, when some of the coaches from the European theater of football are made available to the Canadian Soccer Association or anyone else.
Do you really think it's going to be a European? Do you think they're going to bring a European in?
They could.
I can't even contemplate them bringing a European in at this point. I don't know. I mean,
it doesn't necessarily need to be a European, but the majority
Right.
of the coaches in the world who are going to be available are going to be available at the end of the European season, or closer to the end of the European season.
I suppose, but I mean, well, South America in general doesn't run on that same schedule. Like when, like Brazil and Argentina, the Brasileiro, I think that league only finished up a little bit ago, didn't it?
Yeah, they have a split schedule. They play state championships. They play their
Right.
seasons. So
Right.
there's the South American schedules are a bit different.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of brings up something else we were talking about beforehand and should have recorded because it went off really well. But and then, of course, but that was that. What do you think the CSA's timeline is for a new coach? And is it better to get somebody in sooner so they can get in with the guys into the Gold Cup, take that along, or is it better? What do you think if maybe they just wait and make sure they get the right guy? Which side do you fall on that, Lars? You may as well keep going because you're kind of.
I was kind of rambling there, but you know what? Ideally, they'd have one for the Gold Cup, but it's more important that they get the right person and take the time that they need to get the right person. But if I was going to put a timeline, a deadline on it, if they can't get one by, say, September of this year, we're in some serious trouble.
Why do you say that?
They need that time to prepare. They need to be bringing through the next group of players. They're going to need the entire 2014 year whenever they get the friendlies that they can in that year, because it's a World Cup year, remember, and it's very difficult to arrange games in World Cup years.
Yeah.
People want to play decent teams. They don't want to play teams that haven't been to the World Cup since '86. So that coach needs to have as much time as they can to prepare in 2014. They need to be looking at 2014 as preparation for 2018. And if you're watching me here, you would actually see me waving my hands all over the place. But the reality is our coaches need as much time as possible. They need to completely rebuild the team from the ground up. So
yeah, no question about that. I think, if we have somebody before the Gold Cup, if they make the hire before the Gold Cup, then it's really going to come down to what type of team that coach puts together for the Gold Cup. If he's going to rely on the guys that fell to pieces in San Pedro Sula, or if it's just going to be completely and 100% focused on the qualifiers for 2018. It's in my mind, at least, if it's not necessarily throw away the old, but if it's not a heavy focus on building for that squad that's going to be attempting to qualify for 2018, then obviously the wrong decision's been made. And who they bring on, and I mean, it's interesting reading all the different opinions on the board, which, of course, wading through that cesspool can take time, and if you have enough of it. But
it's fun if you're a sadist, though.
Sorry?
It's fun if you're a sadist, though.
Yeah, that's true. And it's fun to read Robert's posts too. I mean, that just makes it all worthwhile. But if they are going to go with what popular consent is, then they're going to go with somebody that's from Mexico or south, essentially, or at least has experience in coaching a nation from Mexico or further south. But at the same time, I mean, it really begs the question of, whether any of it matters depending on the time frame that he gets hired and where he's from. It's just the whole concept of having to rebuild after the complete collapse is the only thing that's going to matter in the end here, and that's what the CSA has to be judged on in the end anyway. So
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. To just in terms of timing, one thing that occurred to me was that with the if it is a European based coach, it doesn't have to be a European coach. It could be somebody from Central America or Mexico that's coaching in a league over in Europe as well. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
But when those leagues end at the end of April, start of May, to announce the hire prior to that, have somebody segue from their club job into the CSA right in May is perfect timing to start with the camps and stuff for the Gold Cup, and then run them through the Gold Cup. Actually, that would be
absolutely.
That would be brilliant.
You know, we keep talking about foreign coach. It could even be a Canadian. I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but provided that they have the credentials and they have the experience, could be a Canadian coach. The reality is they shouldn't be hiring anyone based on the country they come from. If Aaron Venter is any indication, hiring based on country alone is is nothing short of disastrous. You need to there's a whole lot that goes in with experience, with coaching credentials, and then there's that culture associated with a country, but there needs to be the thing that should be focused on. Number one is experience, number two being credentials, and then number three, those other intangibles that look nice as part of a branding campaign or might be part of bringing in some sort of culture.
Yeah, well, and here's a question then. You mentioned, it could possibly be a Canadian. Could Dasso do it? Would people accept Dasso being handed the full-time reins as full-time coach of Canada? Or would that be looked on immediately as a failure, as a selection failure?
I think anyone theoretically could do it. I don't think Dasovic has the professional coaching experience. Yes, he's coached as an assistant coach and as an interim head coach with Toronto FC. Yes, he's been involved as the head coach with youth teams in Canada, but I don't think at this point, that doesn't mean he won't be the right guy in the future, but I think at this point in time, he's not the right guy. Pardon?
Sorry, no, go. Keep going.
I just think if we were to, if it was to be 4 or 8 years in the future, and Dasovic had been coaching a professional team or well, hopefully only one. Hopefully he's good enough that it's only one. But if it's 2 or 3 professional teams, 4 to 8 years down the road, then yes, maybe we can look at Nick Dasovic as a potential coach for Canada. But I think at this time, no, he's not ready.
And you mentioned one thing that always begs the question, but does coaching Toronto FC actually count as coaching a professional club?
Oh boy, we're gonna get into some rows on this. I can just tell.
Better move it along here, Rob.
Yeah, better move. Well, I was just about to step in and move it along.
So
a little
let's
bit.
go to the friendlies.
Friendlies. Absolutely, we got to talk about the friendlies because this is unusual. I think most people would agree that 3 friendlies before the end of March is not usually the CSA's way of playing ball. Is this an indicator that they're starting to turn it around, or maybe are they just taking advantage of some situations that they found it in? What do you think? Jeff, you better go on this. Lars has been talking too long.
Well, obviously, no, this is not the modus operandi for, usual CSA operations. I mean, I can't think of a time in the last number of years where we've had this many friendlies under our belt before the end of March. I'm just trying to think. I mean, was it last year or the year before? They did put on a couple of friendlies there, but I don't think we had 3 before the end of March. We might have had 2.
Good opposition as
that
well.
That one win we had against Belarus. Wasn't it Greece and Belarus, I think? Was it last year we had Greece and Belarus?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
something like
that. I
that.
think it was only those 2, wasn't it? I think it was only the 2 games.
When did they play Ukraine? Was it just before that? Did they play Ukraine and Greece? I always get them mixed up. I'm getting old.
I can't remember that schedule exactly. But regardless, anyway, no, I think it's fantastic, and if we could play every single international window, we would. I mean, there's nothing but benefit. There's no bad things that can happen from having camps every single national window. I never understand the idea that that playing during an international window is somehow not going to be good. Mind you, I mean, living in a city which has never had a professional club, and
That's
not
right.
having any connection really, not having that professional club based in the city probably changes your opinion completely. So I'm sure when guys are getting pulled away from TFC in Vancouver and possibly Montreal, I'm not sure if the Impact have really had that many guys pulled away, but regardless, it probably changes opinions a little bit. But when it comes to the international windows, I just can't see how that can ever be a bad thing.
Every second international window would be a major improvement, I think, actually, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Lars, what do you think about that? Is the ship turning? Are we going to miss the iceberg? Maybe we already hit the iceberg, actually. But
I think the iceberg was hit a long time ago.
Is the ship turning?
Let's just hope we're not rearranging deck chairs in the Titanic.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? The decision to go with these friendlies was a good one. It was the right one. I wish they would have done it earlier. I wish we would have had all these friendlies, in the last cycle, not happening. 1 second, I might have some issues with my dog here. But
we had a convenient excuse though, didn't we, last year? Or the year before, sorry. The convenient excuse was, well, we have to play all these
minnows,
second round minnow qualifiers.
Yeah.
And everybody was all, happy, joy at that point. The fact that we were able to play all these minnows. But yeah, in the end, perhaps that actually didn't have near the positive implication that playing quality friendlies that are coming up here would. So.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. I think I had done a podcast with Red Nation Online, and I had said something to that effect. Playing those teams, if you can't beat them, you're not learning anything, unless you're on their level. And if we're learning stuff from those games, we're in very serious trouble.
Maybe one of the things we were learning, unfortunately, was that sometimes we just can't score, which seemed to be the case. Some very frustrating games against a couple of those teams. So, but Denmark, the U.S., and Japan, those are quality opponents.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are very strong teams. Actually, we will probably get slaughtered. Maybe not with the U.S. We'll probably, we tend to play up to the U.S.'s level sometimes, or they play down to ours. But Denmark, Japan, that has bad written all over it.
Well, it depends on who they bring too. I think the Danish were saying that they were going to be bringing a young squad too, didn't they?
Well, that would be good, but
even
I still think like if you were to put our first squad against their first squad,
yeah, we
would get crushed. If you were to put our second squad against their second squad, we'd get crushed. This is how my mind works.
Yeah.
But
we would make Nicholas Bentner actually look like a competent striker.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, the thing here is it's good that they're playing the games, and it's very important that they play quality opponents. I wish they weren't so strong, but it's better than not playing at all. So, good on the CSA. Thumbs up.
Okay, so topic 2, the Canadian women's national team. I mean, if you wanted to do a compare and contrast between them and the men, I think it would be more contrast than compare in terms of the years that they just had comparatively. But of course, I said
was
compare.
It contrastably?
Contrastably, yeah, I know, contrastably. I'm going to stop using the words compare and contrast now because I've already exceeded my quota. Anyway, the women, there wasn't a lot of news there, and then now there's tons of news. They're in China. They're playing tonight, actually, or at like 3 or 4 in the morning. I'm not sure what exact time. Had a 1-0 results versus China in the opening game of the tournament they're in, and then there's the new women's soccer league in North America that's going to be a home to a lot of our women. So I think maybe the most important point, the most important talking point. Well, no, it's not the most important talking point, but people are talking about it. Christine Sinclair, Melissa Tancredi are not playing in that tournament, and the women scored. How cool is that? Lars, you start off with that because I'm going to give you your 30 words that you're going to say on this, and then we'll go to Jeff.
Yeah, yes, we scored some goals. No, it's great to see. We pulled off a win against China, which isn't the greatest squad, but they're not a bad squad either. And we did it without Tancredi or Sinclair. And I don't know what else there is to say. It's just really positive, and we got this other game coming up, and we'll get to hopefully see another win, or at least a result of some kind from the women.
I think it's interesting.
Jeff.
Let me just jump in for a second before Jeff. You guys must remember this. Hey, prior to the Olympics, people weren't saying how are we going to score without Sinclair and Tancredi. They were saying how are we going to score without Sinclair.
Yep, absolutely. And it was Tancredi's amazing performance in the Olympics, which has completely changed that paradigm.
That was quite a performance,
wasn't
it?
That one of the sort of hidden little victories that came out of the Olympics is the fact that Melissa Tancredi came out almost, well, I mean, not quite the same heights as Christine did after that game against the U.S., but still, I mean, yeah, it almost shattered the glass ceiling when it came to the women's players. So
the glass ceiling when it came to women,
ceiling, so
except for Sinclair,
be getting the same pay as the men.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both getting paid $0 for all of this, I guess. For national team stuff at least. No, I thought that was, she had such a huge performance throughout the tournament. We were down 2-0 to Sweden, and had she not pulled two goals back in that, the women would have went home. There would have been no medal. There would have been no amazing game against the U.S. None of that would have happened, right? That was the pinnacle, the pivotal part in the Olympic tournament for me, at least, was her brace against Sweden. It was huge.
If we can go back to the China game just for a quick sec here, and not get too caught up in the Olympics, that goal that Adriana Leon scored, I mean, it was a striker's finish. Like, that was just it was a classy goal. I mean, she ran. We were talking about it before starting to record this, but she ran her defender right to the top of the box, turned her the wrong way, cut to the other side, and then just unleashed a well-placed shot. Like, it wasn't like it was just some shot hit with nothing but power. Like, she actually picked out that left corner and finished. Like, it was a striker's finish, and that to me was the most impressive thing about everything, is the fact that she actually had what's the word I'm looking for here? She had the calm nerves to be able to take that opportunity. The composure, thank you. She had the composure to be able to take that opportunity and finish well. Like, we haven't seen any other striker necessarily be able to do that, aside from Tank's goals against Sweden and then classic Christine Sinclair. But that's exciting. I mean, I hope that she scores more and that they continue being that quality of a goal.
Yeah, not to mention, I know it was kind of a bad giveaway by China, but you could see her start to move before the Chinese defender let the pass go.
Yeah.
She started to move. She stepped in and intercepted it, and then it was a bit of a jailbreak for the Chinese defense. They started to bail, but she really was calm, cool, and collected. Backed her defender off and slotted it in very nicely. Yeah. Do you think that the team is a team where you can see them being able to score without their big guns, that it's more likely now that they're in the John Herdman era, or is that major of a change, that maybe that the future without Christine Sinclair isn't nearly as isn't nearly as bleak because Herdman's got them operating on a different level than they were before?
I would say that, to me, at this point, it's going to be what happens after the John Herdman era, which I think is going to have a larger impact than even what happens after the Christine Sinclair era. I mean, obviously, there's no question about it. We'd be losing the best women's player on earth, and she should have won that Ballon d'Or, and I think that was crime. But anyway, we'll lose Christine, but then if other girls like Adriana are going to be able to come through the pipeline and step up in the way that she did in that match, I mean, that was I'm very impressed by how that goal happened. Herdman, obviously, when you listen to the players talk, he completely revolutionized every little aspect of that team. I mean, they already had they had the athletics and some of the skill to be able to pull it off, but the psychological deprecation had happened from the Marache era, and he completely turned it around. And I mean, when he goes, I mean, can they find another coach that's going to be able to bring that level of coaching, that level of belief to the team that he has? I think that's going to be the stepping stone is post John Herdman. And they don't pay that guy enough. I'm sure they don't.
It might become very hard to hold on to him.
I actually think it was this goal scoring is actually more born of necessity rather than any single coach. And the reason why I think that is, a coach can only do so much. He can only work with the tools that he's presented with. I'm not really sure what an apt metaphor here is, but you're not going to hammer in nails with a screwdriver. So the players themselves on one level have to step up, and they have to realize. And I've consistently looked at the Canadian women's team, and there's other people out there I know who look at the women's team and they'll watch them play. And when the Canadian women's team plays poorly, it's because they're playing solely for Christine Sinclair, and that's when it's only her scoring the goals, and that's when players are afraid to take shots. If there's no Christine Sinclair out there, somebody has to step up, or several somebodies have to step up. You take her out of the system, and you force these players to learn how to play without her. And I think that's what we're starting to see here, and it's born of the necessity that we're finally figuring out that she's not going to be around forever. Somebody is going to have to replace her. So yes, now we have our system, we have our coach who's changing things around, but I can't pinpoint any one single tactical change that Herdman brought about, or one sort of psychological change that has revolutionized the way that players play when they're on the field with Sinclair. It's just like yes, they got their confidence then, but when she's out of the system, the reason why they're scoring is because they have to. Otherwise, they don't win. There's no shot at winning. And when we were watching the women play in the Women's World Cup, that disastrous Women's World Cup, everything was focused around Sinclair, and if she wasn't scoring, and if she was taken out of the play, or if she was injured and had a broken nose and wasn't performing to her peak because she was injured, they just folded. So there has to be something else there. It's not just the coach, in my opinion.
I can't agree with that. You look at the way that they played when they were playing under Marache, and yes, they were playing purely into Christine at that point. I think the Germany game has got to be one of the best of how they were playing into her completely from that World Cup. But then, I mean, I think to me the game that really shows that Herdman did have and has had that massive impact is the game against France, the third place match against France. I mean, that goal that Matheson scored, Christine was a part of the play, but she wasn't the focal point of the play like she was when they were playing with Marache. And that completely led to Matheson being able to get on the end of that. I mean, Christine was part of that passing play, but they didn't try to force the ball to her, every chance that they got. That play up the left, or I guess up the right wing, when she passes it over to Sophie Schmidt, and Sophie tries to take the shot, which then luckily rebounds over to Diana. I mean, that was, to me, that was such a turning point in the way that they're playing that I just can't accept the idea that Herdman hasn't had that impact.
I'm not saying Herdman hasn't had an impact. I'm saying that he's not the sole reason for this change. And
I disagree. I guess he is.
I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think when you looked at the players when the team wasn't performing well, they even had a couple bad games in that Olympics in the group stage. When they didn't play well, they were playing solely for Christine Sinclair, and I don't think it's the coach. I think like the coach has obviously had an impact, but I don't think that's the sole thing. I think it's the players themselves have started to look at what they've been doing and have gone, oh geez, we're not playing as well when we do this all the time. And there's some players who still don't take shots. They still try and pass it through, or they still tried to do that when they played France. The thing is, the players who have stepped up and have taken that risk to take a shot instead of passing to Christine and let her take the shot are the ones who are scoring the goals now. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong. I don't know.
Well, maybe I could split the difference between you guys and say that maybe not be a tactical conscious thing that Herdman has done, but perhaps it's just a confidence thing, right? I know personally, and this is a terrible analogy, but I'm going to draw it anyway, that when I play, sometimes you can't recognize that I'm actually playing the sport, but pretend for a second that you can. There's one guy on our team that's head and shoulders better than everybody else. When he's there, it's a bit of a confidence thing. Oh, should I take this shot? Or should I feed it to the guy who I know is money? Right? And if you've got confidence, you don't think that way as much. Maybe that's what Herdman has instilled with them, right? They have a little more confidence in themselves. They're not going to look for the go-to person all the time because they feel a little bit more like they could be the go-to person themselves. Do you think to get away from this topic for a second, to just try to
or a long time?
Yeah, well, whatever.
Maybe talked about it a long time.
Semi permanently, perhaps. Maybe this is the best thing that could happen, going to China without your top two goal scorers in the last tournament and have to compete and suck it up and do it. Players have got to be able to grow through that, hey?
Well, yeah, and that's, I guess, what I was sort of getting at there. It's if you place the necessity on the players, they'll figure it out themselves. Someone has to score goals. You just can't go without a goal scorer.
True, but I think the psychological side of things that Herdman's brought to the team, I mean, it was quite a point when he came on that he wanted to bring on essentially a completely psychological component to the coaching. I think he brought on a sports psychologist to the team coaching squad, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe he did.
I believe
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the psychological coaching and turnaround has to 100% be attributed to him, and that, at least that for me, the psychological component and what he's managed to do with the way that set of players think about the game and competing, I think couldn't possibly have been done prior to him having come on board. I mean, it was 100% from him coming on board, and I think that still is having an impact, as we're seeing right now at the what is it? Is it the Yongshuang or something like that cup? Man, that sounds terrible. Please edit that out. But anyway,
nope.
Anyway, I mean, I don't disagree with you in that point, Lars, where you're saying that the players have to figure it out themselves. But I think I don't know. I'm going to speculate and say that they're probably having an easier time and have more confidence to be able to figure it out themselves because of Herdman and his team being in place than if a coach like Marache was in place instead. And I think he is making all the difference. I honestly do think him and his coaching staff have made all the difference. So
continuing with the big week in Canadian soccer news theme, it was certainly a big week on the domestic league front, on the MLS front. We've got two new coaches, one in Toronto, one in Montreal. And I have to say, I don't think the hirings could be much different in terms of the characterization in the media, in terms of the nuts and bolts of the deals that went on there. It's pretty interesting stuff. I'm not sure if it's making people feel real comfortable in at least one of those camps. You know what, Lars? I'm sure you're dying to talk about this.
Can I interject for 1
sec?
second?
Let's let Jeff talk first.
Okay, well, let's go ahead, Jeff.
I just have to say
Jeff.
the one thing is, really, could TFC have done it any more TFC-esque? You know what I mean? Honest to God.
Actually, I think you just coined the phrase.
How could they possibly have outdone themselves from everything previous, yet God bless them. They went out of their way, and they managed to outdo themselves yet again. I you can't write these stories. These things can't be written. You can't imagine these things. They just have to happen. That that's really sums up TFC right there. So
I think that's a throw to you, Lars. Then
I just want to know, like, what they were thinking. Like, at what point did it's Kevin Payne, right? At
Yeah,
what point did Kevin Payne look at this and say, "Boy, this totally makes sense. Let's hire a guy who's still playing, who might still even play in the World Cup for his his nation, and hire him for the head coach's position that he won't be able to do for several months." At what point do the alarm bells not go off and in your head and go, "This seems like a really bad idea. We're gonna be hiring a coach who can't even do the job for 3 months." Ryan Nelson has never coached a team ever. He has no coaching credentials, like absolutely no certifications, and he's never coached a team. Like, there's finding the right guy, and then there's finding a friend who used to be part of the organization that you were a part of, DC United. That's what this looks like to me.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a way that the discussion could go.
Because that's the only way this makes any sense, is I'm hiring a friend out of a favor or some other, weird obligation of fake brotherhood or God knows what, because it doesn't make any sense. It could not, as Jeff said, it could not have been done in any other way. Like, this is so TFC. I was saying before this hiring, statistically, they could hire anyone and probably do better than they did the last year. Well, now I'm not so sure.
True.
They could lose every single game this year. It could happen.
yeah.
Like, they could have went out and hired, I don't know, the head coach of Hampton and Richmond Borough FC, and out of the English lower divisions, and they probably would have found a more qualified head coach for Toronto FC.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the commentary that's come out of DC is focusing on the nature of the beast when it comes to Kevin Payne. And I don't know if you guys have read too much or heard too much about this, but I like paying attention to guys like Stephen Goff out of DC, and everything from him and from all the DC United fans. They said this is just classic Payne, essentially bringing in a guy that he can, essentially have dance for him whenever he wants, while Payne himself actually pulls all the strings and builds the squad. And I think jokingly a bunch of them were even mentioning that they wouldn't be surprised if it was actually Kevin Payne who is choosing the starting 11 every weekend, which I think has already been seen at TFC before by someone who should never mention that club anymore. But
See,
I don't know.
Here's the question though. That's a pretty dysfunctional relationship, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. But if he's had success in the past, a reasonable, considerable success in the past with DC United doing this, is that not good enough, or is this all going to go down in flames?
Oh, it's going to go down in flames.
You think so?
Yeah,
it's already down in flames.
It's TFC. It's going to go down in flames.
It's already down.
There's not even any doubt on this.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's hard not to be a pessimist. Following the team for 5 years, and now actually, full disclosure here,
they should actually change Murphy's Law to Toronto's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time. Yep. That's really it sums up Toronto FC and their entire existence.
So
okay, let's contrast that, of course, to the Schellebaum hiring in Montreal.
Can I
go? Sorry, go ahead, Jeff. No, go.
His name.
Pardon me?
I love the way that they pronounced his name during the press conference, where it was Marco Schellebaum.
Yeah.
I just loved that. I was like, oh baby, Joey's really pulling out the Europeanization here. It's just he's in his glory when he's doing stuff like that. So.
Absolutely. So, but I mean, here's a guy who has credentials. He doesn't have a massive trophy cabinet necessarily, but anything compared to the Nelson hiring looks pretty good. Any red flags there that you think?
No. They hired someone with a long track record who's been coaching since 1995. Thank you, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And, he's had some up and down seasons. Really, he's a fairly average coach if you go into his record. So, could they have hired someone better? Yes. Is it a bad hiring? No. It's miles upon miles, like leagues better than the TFC hiring of Ryan Nelson.
Jeff, what do you think about that?
I think too, the other thing that I don't think, well, I mean, I'm sure people have thought about it, but with Schallenbaum having been a coach's coach for UEFA, I think they did this hiring not only with this season in mind, but if for instance, they the way it looks like, the way that Joey's talking about it, and Nick DeSantis, is if the Impact don't make the playoffs this season, then he's fired, right? However, after bringing a guy like this on board into the organization, I cannot see them being insane enough to completely dump him out of the organization when he has that kind of coaching experience of not just coaching clubs, but coaching coaches, essentially, coaching European coaches. I couldn't possibly see him not taking a role, essentially becoming not necessarily the head of the academy, but almost becoming like a head of not a coach's academy, but do you know what I mean? Like the coaches that they have coaching the Impact Academy right now, how much of a resource could a guy like Schallenbaum be to them in growing their coaching capabilities, essentially keeping him on as some type of essentially coach's coach strictly for the club.
That certainly was a theme running through many of the articles about his hiring, was that
Yeah.
he was going to have an impact on the other coaches, and that would have an impact throughout the organization. This is kind of a non sequitur, but I also like the way that you call Joey Saputo Joey, as if he's a close personal friend. That's interesting.
Or maybe a friend spinoff.
A friend spin-off.
Yes.
Don't read into that.
No.
I love you, Joey.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no doubt, eh?
Honestly, I think Joey Saputo is the greatest owner out of any of the MLS owners. I mean, you have a guy who runs essentially a milk and cheese empire, and very close connections with a lot of different communities throughout Montreal and even within Europe to a degree. And he's a vibrant owner. And I mean, MLS couldn't ask for a better owner than a guy like Joey Saputo, because the guy, he shows passion wherever he is, whenever he is, he shows passion. And I mean, you look at some of the owners, another perfect owner that fits into that picture is Merritt Paulson out in Portland. The guy, both of them have just flashy personalities, and it's great. It just really works well into the league. So,
and with Jeff's declaration of his Joey love, we end our podcast. We'll have another one soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.